Good evening and welcome to the Freedom News Review, freedomnews.org.uk, broadcasting from Blighty. I'm Freedom Editor Ree Gordon. With us is Simon from Freedom Press. Good evening.
Right.
And tonight we shall be discussing some of the items on our website in the week that has passed, starting with the more immediate news from Rojava getting geared up for potential attacks with the re-escalation of the Syrian civil war, and also here at home with the raid on the London Kurdish Community Center and the arrest of several Democratic Assembly members in an attempt to link them to the PKK. We'll also be discussing the Travelers rally in London following the exclusion of Roma and Irish traveler children from the Christmas fair in Manchester, the new Corporate Watch report dealing with Labour's anticipated migration and deportation policy, and if we have time, the revival of the Newport Radical Book Fair, which is taking place after many years again as part of the Uprising Festival in that city. Let's start then with the emergency and free Rojava as the Syria war reignites. The Kurdish autonomous struggle, as we reported this morning, is being caught between competing interests as the entanglement of local and regional powers enters a new phase. In the past week, a coalition of jihadist rebel groups have been essentially launching a surprise offensive against Assad's Syrian government in northwestern Syria. We're talking about groups led by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the Front for the Liberation of Syria and the East Mediterranean. These include Turkish-backed former Islamic State groups, the Syrian National Army, and Fatah Mubin. And these are now essentially advancing unchallenged to seize control of Aleppo, Syria's second city. On the other side is the forces of the Syrian regime, who have support of pro-Iranian militias and also backed by Russian forces. And sort of in the middle of that, between the hammer and the anvil, are the Syrian Democratic Forces, a largely US-backed coalition that includes the Rojava People's Protection Units and Women's Protection Units. Um, and which have been offered, as far as we know, a safe passage out of Aleppo. Now, this is kind of this conflagration going on at this moment in Syria, with a lot of uncertainty about how that will develop. In parallel, we are seeing a clampdown on Kurdish political presence in the UK, with a raid having taken place in the recent days. This was November 26th, 27th, when there was an invasion of hundreds of police of the Kurdish Community Center in London. Now, this was on the 46th anniversary of the founding of the PKK, which in the United Kingdom is listed as a terrorist organization. There was an invasion of the building on the same date the previous year. This time, six prominent members of the Kurdish People Democratic Assembly in Britain were arrested, and the police is alleging that they are linked to the PKK. This has led to massive demonstrations outside the venue. The police say they want to hold on to it for another 2 weeks in order to search it. We are still awaiting an update on the situation of the arrestees, and one wonders whether these are connected. One sometimes kind of has a sense that the UK is, with one hand, supporting NATO backed forces in Syria to resist Turkey's proxy militias, and with the other hand, almost doing Turkey's bidding locally, with these sort of trophy arrests with alleged links that are undermining political and democratic activity locally.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the obviously one of the things which has been increasingly the case for a while is the use of international arrest warrants and kind of um, Turkey is particularly well known for going after people it doesn't like in other countries by leaning on sort of local forces and drawing on sort of international arrest methods. Uh, it's unclear to me exactly what the um, rationale has been for these arrests, or whether it's what they've been charging them with, if anything. Um, I don't know
Well,
whether you know that.
allegedly, what we heard from the police in the police announcement that it was for activities connected to the Kurdish Workers' Party, the PKK. They are essentially trying to jacket the Kurdish People's Democratic Assembly as a PKK front, with or without concrete evidence. I mean, we may never know what kind of concrete evidence is allegedly that link, or what exact activities are there. And because of the opaqueness of the process, it becomes easy to sort of initially, to a great fanfare, you know, tar political groups with these associations, with the sort of expectation that once these charges are dropped, or once the kind of story fades away from public attention, there will not be any follow up. But of course, we do intend to follow up.
Yeah, I mean, certainly that smacks strongly of most of the prognosis that certainly I've been seeing about what's happening in Syria is that there's a very good chance that Turkey will take the opportunity to extend its um, sphere of influence in the region, possibly even try and put an end to the Kurdish social experiment, so to speak. And there is a very obvious gain to be made there by having leading members of the Kurdish community in cities like London on the back foot at the very least, dealing with their own issues rather than mustering support for under fire people hundreds or thousands of miles away.
And the big question is, why is the UK government cooperating with this on the domestic front? Is this about certain political gains that are expected? Is it an attempt to you know, cozy up to Erdogan ahead of some particular kind of a political deal, or is it just sort of a you know, straightforward you know, compliance with some kind of international arrest warrant, or request of that kind? This is information that is very hard for us to ascertain.
Yeah, I mean, from a great game perspective, it makes a lot of sense for the British government to cozy up to Erdogan right now rather than support the Kurds, because, as we know, with Trump coming in, the chances of US backing for the Kurds is rapidly disappearing. They're under a great deal of pressure from three sides now, essentially. Um, they don't have much in the way of resources that are likely to come in or anything like that. So, the British government, it rarely, if ever, backs a loser through mere morals. Um,
Indeed,
but supporting
as
Erdogan.
As we wrote this morning, Rojava's future depends on navigating regional and international power dynamics while safeguarding its commitment to values such as direct democracy, pluralistic autonomy, libertarian socialism, ecology, and feminism. And the project's survival may hinge on sustained international solidarity in an increasingly volatile geopolitical landscape. So this is the current situation. We'll of course be continuing to monitor it and bring you updates as those come along. Let's look at the other story breaking over the last 2 days, which is the attack on traveller kids in Manchester, leading to a rally outside Parliament yesterday. This is after video footage emerged, which you can see on the BBC. There's a link on our website, of heavy-handed policing that stopped children from leaving the city's train station to go to the city's Christmas market and forcing them on other trains. This had happened on Saturday, 23rd of November. Travelers Times reported injuries and children separated from their families, quoting one of the eyewitnesses saying that it was scenes reminiscent of Nazi Germany, with children being forced onto trains. The police did not really apologize. They characterized the events as a matter of a dispersal order, um, reports of antisocial behavior and the possibility of violence, but those allegations were never really backed up as something that Romani Gypsy and Irish traveler communities see as a manifestation of institutional racism. Um, I guess one thing to mention is the sort of new flag that has been created, as an initiative following these events, sort of joint flag of Irish and Romani communities, has this kind of top blue, bottom green, with the word resistance, a horseshoe figure. You can see that also on our website, featured, with being carried by the demonstrator in front of Big Ben. And yeah, I guess it's interesting to see, how once in a while you just have this flare up of institutional racism in this country with a random kind of, not a random, but one group or another being targeted. And again, the media cycle, if it even notices these events, moves on from them quite quickly, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, Irish travellers in particular have fairly indisputably got the absolute high, like some of the worst remaining racism in Britain is aimed directly at Irish travellers. Like I remember my first workplace, in fact, when I was a nipper, like it was a fairly liberal workplace, and it would, if anyone said anything racist against black people or against migrants, it would tend to be shut down. Um, but travelers, there was basically a bypass where you could say anything horrific about travelers and it was absolutely fine. And that's not uncommon as a phenomenon. Travelers are, as far as I know, one of the this was a couple of years ago maybe. There was a set to because a pub just flat out said no travelers. Um, which
That's
in other
outright
contexts would,
racism. That,
yeah,
yeah, would.
absolutely, and would be seen as such. um, but yeah, it's there's a uh, very specific connecting of Irish travellers to itinerant criminality, essentially. um, and it's
Which
what
is sort of what traveler people, including Romani in Europe, yeah,
Yeah,
have also
absolutely.
faced. There are
Also,
these
yeah,
typical
yeah, yeah.
stereotypes for both groups.
It's a really good thing to see Romani and Irish travellers working together on kind of fighting back against this kind of stuff. Because yeah, like it very much depends on there not being a united front, essentially saying no, you can't just say because we travel around in caravans and such like, or don't have a permanent brick um, abode. It's absolutely fine to suggest that we're constantly going hither and thither, committing crimes and escaping. Um, but it's a traveler sort of turning around the prejudices against travelers is going to be a huge task, I think, because it's been so ingrained over so many years. Um,
Yeah. All right. Well, I mean, if we're on the topic of racism, we may as well move on to the report published this week, just or in the previous, the midweek, by Corporate Watch, the UK-based think tank that researches the social effects of transnational corporations, and this is looking at labor's migration and deportation policies. And many of us had very few illusions that a lot would change under Labor. And the reality is, according to Corporate Watch, that Labor is putting the deportation machine into overdrive. This is an analysis that highlights a few items, and we've got a link on our website report to the full analysis that you can read on the Corporate Watch website. And two things that kind of stood out amid this kind of increase in raids and the three largest mass deportations in British history. I mean, there was mass flights, charter flights to Brazil of deportees. The one thing is this increasing use of algorithms and computerized decision making. So you've got a series of elements that come into play there. We've got what's called IPIC, this home office algorithm that is used in conjunction with the database, which basically recommends specific migrants for detention and deportation based on certain criterias. Now, this does have a human being at the other end, but we know that with the sort of burden of casework, a lot of time people just, you know, file through those computerized decisions, and it could also lead to raids against, for example, particular national groups for the purpose of large-scale deportation flights. Um, the other element, I guess, is that while the Rwanda plan has been abandoned, a lot of the infrastructure that was put in place for it is still being used. We've had mass deportations these last month to Timor-Leste, to Vietnam, and there has been agreed also a plan to temporarily offshore people who claim asylum to the British occupied Chagos Islands, which again are, there's been in the news this whole kind of reporting on the negotiations with Mauritius about the long-term status of these islands. This is also not far from where the American Diego Garcia base is located, which is probably the most important American base in the Indian Ocean. Um, yeah, and I think the while the media this week particularly has been kind of talking about, oh, there's been so many boats arriving, and in 5 months more boats have arrived than in the first 8 months of Rishi Sunak's premiership, and so on. The other side of the coin, um, that we're not being shown is really this ramping up of deportations policy. And I'm kind of sometimes wondering how much of that is just kind of the home office machine doing its thing, and how much of it is a kind of desire on part of labor, even after winning the election, to still position itself as sort of credibly right wing, despite its secure parliamentary majority. And this is kind of this sentence about the masks sticking to the flesh and never coming off.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. So Labour as a centrist machine um, identifies probably correctly that one of that its weakest angle is um, from the far right going after it for migration, and from the conservative right. So the less far right going after it on aspects like welfare. Making life too easy for welfare. And
Claimants.
spending too much on social programs and all that kind of thing. So the way they get around it, or they attempt to get around it, is to steal the shoes of the political groups that are criticizing them. So
There
you
is a
will
very
see.
famous statement made back in the day by John Major. I went swimming in the sea and I came back and I found that Tony Blair had stolen my clothes.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, obviously the problem with doing that, though, as say Macron has found, for example, is that if people are really motivated primarily by uh, being worked up over migrants, they're not going to vote for Farage light because Farage exists, and Labour is kidding itself if it thinks that playing the we're going to be really hard on migration tactic is gonna work because
Because people can just vote for the real thing instead
exactly,
of
and
yeah.
it actually doesn't matter either how tough you're going to pretend to be because they can always say we'll be tougher when we're in power. And also, migration is not solvable in the way that solvable rather in the way that every political party pretends it is. But the Tories kept on saying, "Oh, we'll solve migration," and it just continued. Labour will keep saying, "Oh, we're coming up with better ideas to solve migration," and it will continue. If Farage was in charge, it would continue because migrants are far more motivated to come here than the government is prepared to essentially, they would have to start gunning down boats, and that, thankfully, is still not something that the British public would be prepared to put up with yet.
Indeed, I mean, the only actual solution, as if it was a problem. Yeah, I mean, we say no borders, we say anybody can move anywhere they want, but the root causes of migration, be they poverty as a consequence of colonialism and imperialism, be they climate change, be they war and conflict, are all things that, could be alleviated with an energy transition, with demilitarization, yeah, with reparations, with dropping third world debt. There are multiple international strategies, as well as you know standalone government strategies that could make life less miserable for people outside of the West. Um, but at the same time, it seems none of that is really moving forward. Whereas I sometimes get the feeling that political elites in this country, their strategy is, let's make this country so unattractive to live in that we can prevent people from wanting to come here. Sometimes that really seems to be their game. I don't know.
It's just a thing of like, okay, you can make Britain really unattractive, but can you make it as unattractive as a war zone or somewhere that has just been desertified to the point where it is literally unlivable? It's like this is not a realistic thing to do to make Britain unappealing to the global working class when
But
it's
that
unlivable.
does really seem to be sort of a major sort of mentality behind this. Of course, on the way, you're just making it also a miserable place to live in for everybody who is born or naturalized here. And
And
that
damaging
doesn't.
your own economy as well. Like this is the thing: is that at the moment Britain has a labour shortage, like an ongoing labour shortage. It's going to get considerably worse because the boomer generation is in the middle of retiring or has retired, um, and we've got a tremendously lopsided age crisis, um, and not allowing migrants in and not allowing migrants to work is a recipe for continual economic crisis. But and if Labour had any nous at all, they would be at the very least quietly preparing the ground to open migration up as a matter of national survival. But they don't have the vision for it. Even within their own logics, they don't have the vision for it.
Well, I guess that's what happens when you purge anyone who thinks outside that centrist box a little bit, even. But there we go.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's close with some positive news. Earlier this month, the first radical book for Newport is seen for many years took place. It had at least 200 visitors, 16 stalls, a constant flow of people and conversation across the day. The book fair was held to coincide with the Newport Rising Festival, which celebrates the Chartist uprising of 1839. The Red Shoes Poster Archive, which is a radical archive of working class poster art, teamed up with the local charity Our Chartist Heritage to organize that. Newport in South Wales, often described as having a radical spirit and independence, which can be traced back to that Chartist legacy, and more recently to kind of the important punk and hardcore and alternative culture that existed there in the end of the 20th century. Um, yeah, and the festival's annual torchlit Chartist parade in the early evening passed through, and that also helped increase numbers of those visiting the book fair. So we were very glad to host a nice kind of report, post event report from that, and are also expecting more anarchist and radical book fairs to be announced for the UK in the coming months. We are already looking forward to two book fairs in the north in the new year, in Middlesbrough and the Newcastle Ewan Brown book fair, which is coming up to, I believe it's fourth iteration already. And that's also the reason why I came down to London the other weekend and took a big suitcase full of Freedom Press titles that I shall be tabling at these and other book fairs, along with others in our team. Okay, let's close it for tonight. Freedomnews.org.uk. Stay tuned. The website is updated daily. We will be bringing you in the new week, hopefully, still or still in this week, we'll be bringing you reports on a new High Court review of some of the right to protest cases that we've seen recently. Next week, we also have hopefully an update on the situation in Syria and maybe even an account from one of the people spied upon by Bob Lambert, who will be at the center of the undercover policing inquiry in the coming days. So stay tuned to us, freedomnews.org.uk. We're on Blue Sky, we're on Telegram, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. Coming soon, Freedom on the Moon. Good night, everybody.